At 58 years old, I went from performing surgeries in a $4.7 million home to driving Uber in a rusted Honda Civic. All because my father-in-law was the most powerful judge in Connecticut. My name is Dennis Radford. 3 years ago, I was chief of orthopedic surgery at Hartford Medical Center. I had everything a man could want. A beautiful home in West Hartford with 8 bedrooms and a pool house bigger than most people's actual homes. A wine cellar worth more than most people's retirement funds. And a medical practice that brought in $2 million a year. I drove a Mercedes S-Class. My wife, Beatrice, wore designer clothes and spent her afternoons at the country club playing tennis with the governor's wife. Life was polished, controlled, and predictable. The kind of life you see in glossy magazines, until the day it all collapsed. Now, I pick up drunk college students at 2 in the morning for $15 fares, praying they won't vomit in my back seat, because I can't afford the $100 cleaning fee Uber charges drivers. Every time I look in the rearview mirror, I see a man I barely recognize. The fall wasn't gradual. It was instant, a free fall orchestrated by one man, Judge Cornelius Blackwood, my father-in-law, the man who could smile at you across a dinner table while silently destroying your reputation with a single phone call. When his daughter decided she was bored and wanted to run off with her 28-year-old personal trainer named Rodney, Judge Blackwood made sure I didn't just lose the divorce. He made sure I lost everything. He once told me, "You were useful for keeping my daughter respectable after her first disaster of a marriage." I didn't realize then how serious he was about making sure I'd never recover once my usefulness expired. The first sign that things were falling apart came on a Thursday afternoon. The kind of ordinary day you never forget because of what follows. Beatrice walked into my office wearing her usual oversized sunglasses, holding a cup of iced coffee like she was posing for a lifestyle magazine. But there was something different in her voice. Detached. Cold. "Dennis," she said, "we need to talk." Those 4 words, the prelude to disaster. I thought she was upset about a canceled trip, or maybe one of the kids needing money again. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'm done pretending." Within 2 weeks, she had moved into a downtown penthouse, paid for by her father, of course, and was posting photos on social media with her new boyfriend, Rodney, a 28-year-old personal trainer who looked like he lived at the gym and thought wearing shirts was optional. When I confronted her about it, she didn't deny anything. "You were safe," she said, "predictable. But I want passion, Dennis. I want to live." Passion. She called throwing away 30 years of marriage passion. By the time the divorce papers arrived, I thought I could handle it like a professional. I was wrong. The moment I saw Judge Blackwood's name on the document as a consultant, my stomach dropped. Judges don't consult on their daughters' divorces, unless they're making sure the outcome is already written. That was when the nightmare began. My accounts were frozen. My private practice was suddenly under review by the state medical board for potential billing irregularities. The medical journal that was about to publish my latest research pulled my article, citing new concerns about credibility. Even my colleagues stopped returning calls. Overnight, I went from respected surgeon to whispered rumor. It didn't take a genius to see the strings being pulled. Cornelius Blackwood didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply spoke and things happened. Judges owed him favors. Prosecutors feared him. And anyone who crossed him quietly disappeared from the professional map. When I finally faced him in court, he didn't look at me like a man addressing his former son-in-law. He looked at me like a man tying up loose ends. Sitting behind Beatrice, wearing his black suit and silver cufflinks, he smiled at me. Not a warm smile, but one that said, "I warned you." My attorney, a nervous man half my age, tried his best. But there's no winning when the referee's your enemy. The judge assigned to our case was one of Cornelius's golf buddies. Every objection from my lawyer was overruled. Every claim from Beatrice's side was accepted without question. When the verdict came, I lost the house, my savings, and the clinic. Beatrice got everything, the house, the cars, even the damn dog. I was left with a suitcase of clothes and my medical license hanging by a thread. I confronted Cornelius after court. "You did this," I told him. "You destroyed my life." He didn't even blink. "You should have known your place, Dennis," he said. "You married up, and you forgot to be grateful." That night, I drove around for hours, ending up in the parking lot of my old hospital. I sat there watching the lights flicker through the rain, wondering how a man who once saved lives for a living could lose his own in every other way. When I finally got home, to my new, cramped apartment, I found a letter slid under the door. No return address, just one line typed on plain paper. "You're not the only one he's ruined. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., Cafe Verona." That was the moment I realized my story wasn't over. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. Cafe Verona was one of those old-fashioned places that still smelled like real coffee and wooden tables. The kind of place Beatrice used to call quaint before she decided everything in her life needed to sparkle. I hadn't been there in years, but the moment I walked in that morning, it felt like stepping back into a time when I still believed hard work meant something. A woman sat in the corner, wearing a navy trench coat and dark sunglasses despite the cloudy weather. She had a folder on the table and a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold. When she saw me, she lifted her head slightly and said, "Dr. Radford?" "Yes," I replied, cautious. "You're the one who left the note?" She nodded. "My name's Claire Benton. I used to work for Judge Blackwood." The name hit like a hammer. She slid the folder across the table. Inside were copies of legal documents, financial transfers, and court filings I recognized from my own divorce. But these weren't mine. They were from other cases. Different people, same pattern. Each had one thing in common. They all crossed paths with Judge Cornelius Blackwood. Claire leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You're not the first man he's destroyed, but you might be the last if we can prove what I think we can." I scanned the pages, my pulse quickening. There were names of doctors, business owners, even a small-town mayor. All of them had lost everything after being dragged through legal battles that seemed orchestrated. And in every case, the presiding judge was either a close friend of Cornelius or someone who owed him a favor. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I can't take him down alone," she said. "And because I owe him." Turns out Claire had been his personal clerk for nearly 15 years. She'd seen the backroom deals, the sealed files, the manipulated rulings. But it wasn't until her own brother, a man accused of fraud, was sentenced to 10 years in prison under Cornelius's jurisdiction, that she realized the monster she'd been helping feed. She took a deep breath. He had evidence that could have cleared my brother, destroyed it, said it was for the greater good. My brother killed himself in prison 3 months later. Her voice broke on the last word. I didn't know what to say. I'd lost my reputation, my home, my marriage, but this woman had lost blood. I sat back, the weight of it all pressing down. "If what you're saying is true, we'll need proof that sticks. Something undeniable." She nodded and opened her laptop. "I already have some. He used a private network for his off-record communications. I still have access to parts of it. And there's something else." She hesitated before continuing. "Your mother-in-law, Evelyn Blackwood, she's dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She's been trying to reach you. That caught me off guard." "Evelyn? Why?" Claire looked me in the eye. "Because she has a secret your wife and her father never wanted you to know. And she's ready to talk." The air between us thickened. "What kind of secret?" I asked. "One that could ruin Judge Blackwood forever," she said quietly. "But we need to move fast. He's already started cleaning house. If he suspects you're talking to me, you'll lose more than just your career." For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I hadn't felt since my life fell apart. Purpose. I didn't know what Evelyn wanted to tell me, or what kind of storm I was about to walk into. But one thing was clear. The fall of Judge Cornelius Blackwood was about to begin. Evelyn Blackwood lived in a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Hartford, a cold, Gothic mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. I'd been there countless times during my marriage, mostly for holiday dinners that felt more like board meetings than family gatherings. But this time, as I drove up the long stone driveway in my beat-up Honda Civic, the place felt haunted. I parked beside a Mercedes I didn't recognize. The front door opened before I even knocked. A nurse stepped out, mid-30s, exhausted eyes. "She's been waiting for you, Dr. Radford," she said softly. "She doesn't have much time." Evelyn was in a recliner by the window, her frame smaller than I remembered, wrapped in a pale blue blanket. The once commanding matriarch of the Blackwood family looked fragile now, almost translucent, her hands trembling as she lifted a cup of tea. "Dennis," she whispered when she saw me. "You came." I nodded, stepping closer. "Claire Benton said you wanted to see me." At the mention of Claire, her eyes flickered with a mix of relief and fear. "Then she's told you something already." "She told me enough to know your husband destroyed my life, and a lot of others," I said quietly. Evelyn smiled sadly. "Cornelius destroyed more than lives, Dennis. He destroyed souls." She gestured for me to sit. I did. The nurse quietly left, closing the door behind her. Evelyn took a shaky breath and looked out the window at the gray afternoon sky. "Beatrice wasn't always his daughter," she said. For a moment I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Evelyn said, voice trembling, "she was mine, but not his." My pulse quickened. "So she's—" "Your wife's biological father was not Cornelius Blackwood," she said. Her real father was a man named Martin Lang, a surgeon at St. Catherine's Hospital. We were in love before Cornelius and I married. Beatrice was born 8 months after the wedding. I sat in stunned silence as she continued. Cornelius knew. He always knew. But rather than leave me, he used her to control me, to punish me. Every time I tried to speak, he threatened to ruin Martin's life. When Martin died in a car crash years later, Cornelius finally had full control. He raised Beatrice as his own, and she never knew the truth. She looked at me then, tears in her eyes. You were never supposed to be his target, Dennis. You just reminded him too much of Martin. Same ambition, same stubbornness. When you married Beatrice, he saw it as betrayal all over again. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My life hadn't been destroyed because of money or pride or divorce. It had been destroyed because of a decades-old grudge. Evelyn reached for a small wooden box on the table beside her. Her hands shook as she pushed it toward me. Inside are letters. From Martin, from me, and a photograph that proves everything. If you give this to the right people, you can take him down. But you have to promise me one thing. I swallowed hard. What's that? She squeezed my hand weakly. Don't let Beatrice become him. She's her father's daughter in ways she doesn't even know. But there's still a part of her that can be saved. I opened the box just enough to see the old photograph inside. A young Evelyn holding a baby in her arms, standing beside a man I'd never seen before. Martin Lang. Evelyn smiled faintly, her breathing shallow. Tell her I'm sorry. By the time I looked up, her eyes were closed, her hand limp in mine. Evelyn Blackwood was gone, and I was holding the evidence that could destroy the most powerful man in Connecticut. The drive back from the Blackwood estate felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my own life and into someone else's nightmare. The small wooden box sat on the passenger seat beside me, glowing faintly in the moonlight that crept through the windshield. Every bump on the road seemed to echo Evelyn's last words. Don't let Beatrice become him. I pulled over halfway home, my hands trembling. I couldn't wait any longer. I opened the box again and pulled out the folded letters inside. The first was written in faded blue ink, the kind that only old fountain pens leave behind. My dearest Evelyn, I know the risk of writing this, but I can't let you carry this burden alone. Our daughter deserves to know where she came from. One day, even if we can't tell her now. Cornelius is powerful, yes, but power fades. Truth doesn't. Martin. The words blurred as I read them. There were several more letters, all written over months, maybe years. Each one told the same story. A love affair silenced by fear, a child born into deception, and a man crushed under Cornelius Blackwood's control. Then, at the bottom of the box, under the letters and photograph, was an envelope with my name written on it. My pulse spiked. I tore it open carefully, expecting more of Evelyn's handwriting, but it wasn't from her. It was from Cornelius. Dennis. If you're reading this, it means Evelyn is dead and you found what she wanted you to find. Good. That means it's time for you to understand something. You think you're the victim of injustice. You think I ruined your life because I could. But the truth is simpler than that. I ruin people who get too close to the truth. You got too close when you married my daughter. And if you ever come for me, you'll end up like Martin Lang. See Blackwood. The paper slipped from my hands. The old judge knew I'd find the truth. He had set this all up like a chess game he'd been playing for decades. And I'd just walked right into the checkmate square. I drove the rest of the way home in silence, headlights cutting through the darkness, heart pounding in my throat. When I pulled into my small apartment complex, a rundown place behind a gas station, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A black sedan, parked across the street, lights off, engine idling. I sat there for a long time, pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending I didn't notice. But deep down I knew, Cornelius Blackwood wasn't done with me. Inside my apartment, I locked every door, pulled the curtains shut, and laid everything out on the kitchen table. The letters, the photo, the note. It was enough to destroy a career, maybe even a dynasty. But it was also enough to destroy me if it got into the wrong hands. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Dr. Radford, a calm voice said. This is Agent Harper with the FBI. We need to talk about Judge Blackwood. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. How did you get my number? We've been investigating him for a while. Wire fraud, bribery, jury tampering, the works, she said. But we've never had concrete evidence tying him to anything. Until now, I looked at the wooden box. What if I told you I had something that could bring him down? There was a pause. Then she said, Then you're not safe, Dr. Radford. We can protect you, but you'll have to trust us. I glanced toward the window. The black sedan was still there. Engine still running. All right, I said quietly. Tell me what to do. As I hung up, I realized Evelyn had done more than give me her confession. She'd handed me a weapon, one powerful enough to end a man's reign of terror. But I also knew one thing for sure. Before this was over, someone wasn't going to make it out alive. That night, sleep wasn't even a possibility. I sat on the couch staring at the wooden box. Evelyn's letters spread across the table like the pieces of a puzzle that spelled danger. Every sound outside, the faint hum of cars, the rustle of wind through the blinds, made my pulse jump. That black sedan hadn't moved. By dawn, I was still awake when my phone buzzed again. It was Agent Harper. "We're sending someone to meet you, Dr. Radford," she said. "Don't go anywhere. And don't talk to anyone." Her voice was calm, professional, but there was an undercurrent of urgency, something she wasn't saying. 2 hours later, there was a knock on my door. A man in a dark suit stood outside holding up an ID. "Agent Brooks, FBI, hear about Judge Blackwood. His timing was too perfect." Too soon. Harper had said they'd send someone, but not that fast. My gut twisted. "Let me see that badge again," I said. He smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. "We don't have much time, Doctor. The Bureau's got a team on standby. We need that box." He stepped forward, but I didn't move. The light hit his badge, and that's when I saw it. The font was off, too bold, wrong color, fake. I slammed the door and locked it, backing away as he started pounding. "You're making a mistake, Radford," he shouted. "You don't know what you're dealing with." He was right about that, but not in the way he thought. I grabbed the box, my phone, and slipped out the back door, heart hammering against my ribs. The alley behind my building smelled like wet garbage and burnt oil, but it was my only way out. I sprinted 2 blocks before I heard it. An engine revving behind me. The same black sedan. They'd spotted me. I ducked into a diner and slid into a booth near the back. My shirt was soaked with sweat, my hands shaking as I dialed Harper's number again. She picked up on the first ring. "Where are you?" "I think one of your agents just tried to kill me," I hissed. Name was Brooks, she swore under her breath. "We don't have anyone by that name on this case. Listen to me carefully, Dennis. You're not dealing with just corruption. You're dealing with a network. People inside the system. Blackwood built this web for decades, and now it's collapsing." I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the diner window, trying to slow my breathing. "So what do I do?" "Meet me tonight," she said. "Old train depot, off Route 11, midnight. Bring the box. We'll get you protection." I hung up and stared out the window. Across the street, parked by the curb, the sedan idled again. Tinted windows, no plates, just waiting. That entire day crawled by. I stayed in public places. A library, a crowded cafe, a park, anywhere I could blend in. By nightfall, my nerves were shot. Every time someone brushed past me, I flinched. Every police car that rolled by made my stomach tighten. When midnight finally came, I drove to the depot. It was old, half-abandoned, bathed in flickering yellow light from the single lamp outside. Harper was already there. Tall, sharp eyes, dark trench coat. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You've got it?" I nodded and handed her the box. Evelyn's letters, photos, even one from the judge himself. She flipped through the pages quickly. "This is more than enough. If this holds up, we can indict half the people tied to him." A sound echoed through the depot, metal creaking, slow footsteps. Harper froze. "We've been followed." Then a voice called out from the shadows, smooth, calm, and chillingly familiar. "Dennis," the voice said. "You should have left well enough alone." Cornelius Blackwood stepped into the light, flanked by 2 men in black coats. His smile was as polished as ever. "After all," he said softly, "you were never supposed to find Evelyn's box." And in that moment, I knew. The real game had just begun. For a moment, I couldn't move. The air inside that old train depot felt heavy, thick with dust, oil, and the weight of too many memories. Cornelius Blackwood stood in front of me, calm as ever, as if this were just another courtroom where he already knew the verdict. His tailored coat barely moved in the breeze seeping through the broken windows. "Judge Blackwood," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "I should have known you'd show up." He smiled faintly. "You've always been predictable, Dennis. I knew if you ever stumbled across Evelyn's little secret, you'd do the noble thing. Try to expose it. It's what makes you such a disappointment, and such a threat." Harper shifted beside me, her hand hovering near her coat pocket. "Don't move," she said, eyes flicking toward the men behind him. "You're surrounded." Blackwood chuckled. That deep, arrogant laugh I remembered from every dinner he'd ever hosted, every time he'd made me feel small. "Surrounded," he said. "Agent Harper, do you think the Bureau isn't already in my pocket? You've been working for me longer than you realize. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt cross Harper's face. He turned back to me. You could have walked away, Dennis. You could have taken your meager life, your little car, your pathetic dignity, and disappeared. But you just had to dig, didn't you? Always the surgeon, always trying to fix things that aren't broken. I took a step closer. You destroyed my life to protect your daughter's lies. You took everything from me. He tilted his head, eyes sharp. I gave you Beatrice. I gave you access. And when you became inconvenient, well, I simply corrected the mistake. Harper's voice broke through the tension. We have your letters, Judge. We have Evelyn's testimony, her photos, her recordings. You can't hide behind your title anymore, he smirked. Those letters are nothing without context. And context, Agent Harper, is something I control. The sound of footsteps echoed from the far side of the depot. 2 more figures entered, but instead of more of his men, they were wearing FBI vests. Real ones this time. One of them shouted, "Federal agents!" Hands where we can see them. Everything exploded at once. Blackwood reached inside his coat, but Harper was faster. She pulled her gun and fired. One sharp, echoing shot that rang through the hollow building. One of Blackwood's men went down. The other lunged forward, tackling Harper to the ground. I ducked behind a pillar, heart hammering, the old wood splintering as bullets tore through it. Someone shouted orders. Someone screamed. And then, silence. When I looked up, Harper was standing over Blackwood, gun still in her hand. He was on his knees, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his coat. "Call an ambulance," she said, voice shaking. But Blackwood only smiled. "You think this ends with me?" he rasped. "You don't know what you've started. There are others. Higher. Older. You'll never touch them." I stepped forward, kneeling down beside him. "Maybe not," I said quietly, "but I'll make sure your name is the one people remember when this house of cards collapses." He laughed again, weaker this time, but still smug. "You always were sentimental, Dennis." The agents pulled him up, read him his rights, and dragged him away. Harper holstered her gun, breathing hard, staring at the puddle of blood spreading across the dusty floor. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, but a strange, hollow calm. The kind that comes when a storm finally ends, and all that's left is the wreckage. Harper turned to me. "You did good," she said softly. "You did the right thing." I nodded, staring at the blood trail fading into the dark. "Then why," I whispered, "does it still feel like I lost?" She didn't answer, and maybe she didn't have to. Because deep down I knew, this wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of the fallout. 3 days after Mom's funeral, I was sitting in her living room surrounded by the faint scent of lavender and the quiet hum of her old grandfather clock. The lawyer, Mr. Holloway, placed a thick manila envelope on the coffee table and looked at me with an expression that could only be described as hesitant empathy. "Your mother left you something," he said softly, sliding the envelope across. "She asked that you open it only after her passing. She was very specific about that." I took the envelope with trembling hands. On the front, in her familiar cursive, it simply read, "For Dennis, when you're ready to know the truth." Inside, there were old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a letter. Her handwriting shook slightly, but the words were clear. "My dearest Dennis, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're ready to know what I've carried for over 40 years. The man you call your father isn't your biological father. I never told anyone, not even him. Before I met Richard Radford, I worked as a clerk at the New Haven courthouse. There was a man there, kind, brilliant, deeply moral, who changed my life in ways I could never explain. His name was Cornelius Blackwood." I froze. The name hit me like a freight train. Judge Cornelius Blackwood, my father-in-law, the man who destroyed my life, was my biological father. I kept reading, my pulse pounding. "I never meant to deceive you, Dennis. Cornelius didn't know about you. We were both young, and I was scared. When I found out I was pregnant, he had already begun his rapid rise through the legal system. I didn't want to ruin his career. I met Richard a few months later. He married me knowing the truth. You were always loved." I dropped the letter. My entire body went cold. Everything. The judge's subtle favoritism early in my marriage. The strange tension he always carried around me. His fury when Beatrice and I fought. Suddenly made sense. I wasn't just his son-in-law. I was his son. The next day I went to confront him. I drove to his sprawling mansion in Greenwich. The same one where Beatrice had once thrown charity galas with diamond-encrusted champagne glasses. The judge answered the door himself, his silver hair slicked back, his expression sharp as ever. "Dennis," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "What do you want?" I pulled the letter from my jacket pocket and handed it to him without a word. He took one look at the handwriting and froze. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "It's from Mom," I said quietly. "Your handwriting's not the only thing I inherited." He looked at me for a long moment. Then his eyes softened, for the first time since I'd known him. His lips trembled, and for a second, the mask of the powerful judge slipped away, revealing something almost human beneath. "My God," he muttered. "It can't be." "It is," I said. "I'm your son." For the first time, the man who had ruined me didn't have a single word to say. He sat down, pale and shaken, his hands trembling against the edge of the table, and I realized the balance of power had shifted completely. The man who once destroyed me with a stroke of his pen now knew I could destroy him with a single truth. But I wasn't sure yet, whether I wanted revenge or redemption. Before we move on to what happens next, subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments, what would you do if you found out your enemy was your father? Judge Cornelius Blackwood sat in silence for nearly 5 minutes after I revealed the truth. The air between us was thick, not with anger, but with the weight of decades of buried secrets clawing their way to the surface. Finally, he spoke, his voice raspier than I'd ever heard. "Your mother, Margaret, I loved her once. Before all of this, before politics, before power, she was good." He rubbed his temple, his hand shaking slightly. For a moment, the image of the untouchable judge vanished, replaced by an aging man haunted by ghosts of choices made long ago. I should have felt sympathy, but all I could see was the man who had stripped me of everything. My career, my home, my dignity. "Good," I said bitterly. "She spent 40 years hiding your secret while you ruined my life. That's one hell of a definition of love, Judge." His eyes met mine, the same sharp blue eyes that stared back at me in the mirror every morning. "You think I knew?" he said, his tone hardening again. "If I'd known you were my son, I never would have." "Wouldn't have what?" I snapped. "Destroyed me in court? Used your influence to turn my wife against me? You had no problem burying me under legal bills and lies." He leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You were hurting my daughter." "Your daughter cheated on me," I shouted. "And you made me pay for it!" The room fell silent. The judge took a deep breath and looked away, ashamed. For the first time in my life, I saw Cornelius Blackwood not as a monster, but as a man who'd lost control of the very system he built. Then he said something I never expected. "Dennis, I can make this right." I laughed. "You can't make this right. You can't give me back my career or the years I spent living in humiliation." He reached into his drawer and pulled out a thick file. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. I didn't. But when he slid it across the table, my name was stamped across the front. Radford Dennis, case number 14329B. "I kept this," he said quietly. "Your file. Every motion, every transcript, every signed affidavit. I know what was done to you wasn't fair. Beatrice and her attorney," he hesitated, his expression darkening. "They fabricated certain financial records. I ignored the inconsistencies because I couldn't stand the thought of her suffering another failed marriage. I was wrong. Hearing those words, 'I was wrong,' felt surreal. The man who had humiliated me in front of the entire state's legal community was now confessing. So what now? I asked cautiously. He exhaled, almost defeated. "I'm dying, Dennis. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. I wanted to go out with my legacy intact, but now I need to fix what I've broken." He opened his safe and took out a sealed envelope. "This is my revised will," he said. "Everything, my estate, my investments, my pension, they're yours. I can't undo what I did, but I can make sure the world knows you're not the villain." I stared at him, unsure whether to feel vindicated or disgusted. The man who'd taken everything from me was now offering everything he owned, not out of love, but guilt. And yet, as I looked at him, frail, remorseful, and dying, a strange calm settled over me. Maybe this was the justice I'd been chasing all along. Not revenge, not redemption, just truth finally coming full circle. Before we move to the final chapter, hit subscribe for more powerful stories, and tell me, do you think I should forgive him? Or let him die with his guilt? Judge Cornelius Blackwood passed away 3 weeks later. No courtroom, no final statement, no jury, just silence. He died alone in his mansion, surrounded by portraits of himself shaking hands with governors, senators, and men who worshipped his power. When the news broke, the media painted him as a legend, a pillar of justice, a man who defined Connecticut law. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew the man behind the robe, the father who destroyed his own son. The day of the will reading, I sat in that same cold office where he once looked down at me like I was dirt. The lawyer handed me an envelope. He wanted you to have this first, she said. Inside was a handwritten note, shaky but unmistakably his. Dennis, I spent my life handing out sentences, but I never faced my own. You were the best thing I ever created, and I destroyed you before I even knew it. Use what I've left you to live, not to remember me. Cornelius. For a long time I just stared at the letter. Then I folded it and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I didn't take his estate for revenge. I took it because for the first time, the scales had balanced. Justice, in its strangest form, had finally been served. Now, I drive past Hartford Medical Center every morning. Not as the man who lost everything, but as the man who survived it all. I don't hate him anymore, because hate, I've learned, is just another kind of prison. Before we end this story, tell me, if someone who ruined your life tried to make it right at the end, would you forgive them?